right, number 41, we made it. The last question of practice test number 2 for college algebra. And we're asked to graph the solution set of the system of inequalities. And we've been given x plus 2y is less than or equal to 2, and x plus y is greater than or equal to 2. So we know we're going to be graphing each of these inequalities and shading independently on the xy plane here, and then wherever the shading for these inequalities overlaps, where it is double shaded, this graph, that will be the solution set that we're looking for. So let's take it step by step. Let's just take a look at this first inequality here, and I guess I'll use, not black, but I'll use blue. And we've been given x plus 2y is less than or equal to 2. And sometimes it's a little intimidating when you see the inequality symbol, right? So instead of an inequality symbol, let's pretend that they gave us an equal sign. So let's pretend they gave us x plus 2y equals 2. And how would you graph this line? Well, you could do y equals mx plus b. We could choose our xy intercepts, or rather find the x and y intercepts. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's find our intercepts. So to do that, we'll create a little xy table very quickly for ourselves and our double zeros, and now we're ready to go. So let's first solve for the y-intercept, and to do that, we're going to plug in 0 for x. So 0 plus 2y equals 2. That 0 goes away, so we're left with 2y equals 2. We want y all by itself, so let's divide by 2 on both sides, and that gives us y equals 1. All right, so there's the y-intercept, and now we're going to go ahead and find the x-intercept. I guess I'll leave that work up there. And what we're going to do is plug 0 in for y and solve for x. So x plus 2, plug in that 0 for y, equals 2. We know 2 times 0 goes away, that's just 0, so we're left with x equals 2. All right, so now we've got our xy table filled out. We know that now these simply become points, don't they? This is the point 0, 1. This here becomes the point 2, 0. Let's go ahead and plot these 2 points. So 0, 1, that's our y-intercept. 2, 0, that is our x-intercept. Now that we have 2 points, we can go ahead and connect these 2 points. But before we do, let's go back and look at the original inequality that we were given. Remember, this was an inequality. It was not an equation. We simply swapped out this inequality symbol for the equation, the equal sign, just to kind of help us and make us a little more comfortable when finding the x, y intercepts. But now that we're actually going to draw the line, draw the graph, we need to go back, look at the inequality symbol, because remember, if your inequality is less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, you have to use a solid line when connecting your points when drawing the graph. If you have simply less than or greater than, you can use a dashed or dotted line. And a kind of a quick way that I remember which is, notice here with the inequality less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, what kind of line is this underneath the actual, what we would consider maybe like the alligator mouth? Maybe that sounds familiar from elementary or middle school, right? This is a solid line, isn't it? And so with less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, we use solid line. If your inequality symbol does not have that or equals to, then you're simply going to use a dashed or dotted line. All right, so going back to the original inequality, it was a less than or equal to, so we are going to use a solid line when we connect these. Wow, that was bad. All right, you guys know by now that I'm not very good at connecting dots, points freehand. All right, so that's going to have to do. And now with inequalities, we know that we have to determine, based on a test point, whether or not to shade above the line or below the line. And we can really choose any test point we want, so long as the point we're choosing to test does not fall on the line itself. And if I'm able to, I always like to use the origin, the 0, 0, as my test point, because it's easy to work with zeros. So let's test 0, 0 for our first inequality here. And all we're going to do is we're going to plug this test point into the original inequality and see if we get a true or false statement. So if we plug in 0 for x plus 2 times y, but y we're saying is now 0, so there's our 0 comma 0, less than or equal to 2, well 0 goes away, 2 times 0 goes away, so we're left with 0 is less than or equal to 2. Is this a true statement? Yeah, it sure is. 0 is less than or equal to 2, so this is true. And because the point that we chose to test was the origin right in the middle there, and we got a true statement, that means we're going to shade on this side. All right, so we're shading below the line, and I'll indicate which side of the line we're shading using these little arrows, and we'll come back to the shading at the very end. All right, so we've got our first inequality graphed. We know where we're shading. Let's go ahead and take a look at the second inequality, and I'll go ahead and use a different color. So we're looking at x plus y greater than or equal to 0. And again, just like we did before, if this inequality symbol scares you, then let's pretend that instead of an inequality, we were simply given x plus y equals 0. How would you graph this line? Well, again, we could either put this in y equals mx plus b, or we could find our intercepts. Let's go ahead and find the intercepts. Let's see what happens. I think something interesting will happen here. So we're going to create our xy table. We know we're going to fill in double zeros. So let's solve. Let's plug in 0 for x and see what happens. Plug in 0 for x plus y equals 0. Well, we know 0 will just go away. That'll leave us with y equals 0. All right. And now let's solve for the x-intercept. So we'll plug in 0 for y and solve. 0 goes away, so we're left with simply x equals 0. And so now we have points that come out of this, right? So this is going to be the point 0, comma 0. This will be the point 0, comma 0. Uh-oh. So what do we have here? We have two points that we thought we were finding, but it turns out that the x-intercept and the y-intercept is the origin. They cross right at 0, comma 0. So if we try to graph each of these points, because they're the same point, we only can really end up getting 1 point, right? So there's 0, comma 0. And if we graph 0, comma 0 again, it's the same point right on top of it. So we're not able to create a line, right? Because we need 2 points in order to graph a line. So what we're going to do is we're going to arbitrarily, meaning at your discretion, choose some other x or y value. It doesn't matter if you choose an x value or y value. What we're going to do is just simply choose one. How about we choose 1 for x? We're going to plug it in and see what we get for y. So if we choose 1 for x, we'll get 1 plus y equals 0. Well, that's 1 plus y equals 0. We will subtract 1 from both sides, and that leaves us with y equals negative 1. All right, so when x is positive 1, the corresponding y is negative 1, and now this becomes the point 1, negative 1. That is a new point, a different point, so we can go ahead and graph. So 1, negative 1, right there. Again, before we connect these 2 points, go back and look at what the inequality was, because we have to remember either to use a solid line or a dashed line. Based on this inequality, we're going to be using a a solid line, right? So there's our solid line, and now we're going to determine where to shade. Are we going to shade below the line or above the line? Well, let's find out. And oh, you know what I noticed I just did? I graphed this line incorrectly, didn't I? I didn't graph. That second point is wrong. So 0, 0 is correct. There's the first point. But the second point, 1, negative 1, is this way. 1, negative 1. I went the opposite way. All right, and again, we're going to connect these 2 points with a solid line. I'm going to do my best, something like that. All right, and now we need to determine, are we shading above the green line or are we shading below the green line? So let me go ahead and get some room for us. Again, let's use a test point, but notice now that because this line, the green line, goes through the point 0, 0, the origin, we cannot use that as a test point. So let's use another equally easy point. Maybe we use 1, 1, which is right there. All right, so if we test 1, comma 1, we're going to plug this point into the original inequality and see if we get a true or false statement. So we have 1 plus 1 is greater than or equal to 0. We know 1 plus 1 is 2, so 2 is greater than 0. Is this a true statement or a false statement? Well, we know that's true. 2 is greater than or equal to 0. So because the point we chose is above the line and we got a true statement, we're going to shade above the line. All right. And remember, now that we've graphed both inequalities, we know where we're shading. We're shading below the blue line, but above the green line. We're only interested in the portion of the graph that is double shaded, where the shading overlaps. And based on what I see, if we're shading below the blue but above the green, the only section that it looks like is going to get shaded, where the shading overlaps, is inside this little triangle here. All right, so that's the only portion of our graph that is double shaded, and so that is the solution set. And again, if you want, make sure that part of your graph is dark, extra dark. The shading is only happening in this portion of the graph, because this is the only portion of the graph where the shading is overlapping each other. So that's the only part of the graph we're interested in. And if you want, you can go ahead and make a dark A for answer inside that double shaded portion. All right, but there is number 41, the last question in practice test number 2. Go ahead and take a look at the next video, the wrap-up video. I'll have some just quick tips, tricks about how to be successful on test number 2. But as always, this is Joe Brownlee with Palm Beach State College. Thanks for watching. Hope it was helpful. And if you need anything, please don't hesitate to email me. All right, so I will see you in the wrap-up video. Until next time, thanks for watching.